Good evening, you beautiful exhausted human. Slightly smiling face, you made it to the soft edge of night, where your screen stops feeling urgent and your thoughts finally loosen their grip. Tonight you don't have to fix anything. You just have to listen, breathe, and let a place older than your calendar hold you for a while. In your mind, you're in central Java before dawn, when the air is cool enough to feel clean and the world looks like it's still deciding whether to wake. Mist slides over dark fields like slow milk. Far off, a volcano rests behind a veil, massive, quiet, a shape you sense more than see. And out of that gray-blue hush, Borobudur rises, not like a building, but like a thought you can walk inside, a stone spiral, a hill made by hands, a dream with steps. You probably won't survive this in the way you think you will. Not because anything attacks you, relax, but because the place is going to sand down the sharp corners you've been carrying, and your inner drama queen will protest the whole time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been, your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now turn off the lights. Take a deep, slow breath. Let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. Your breath slows and you arrive. It is still night when you step into the open air, but it isn't the heavy, sticky night your imagination assigns to anything with palm trees. This night is cool at the edges, slightly damp, and scented with wet leaves. The world feels rinsed. The ground under you is steady, and the silence has that rare quality of being full, not empty. Ahead, the temple is mostly silhouette. It sits on its hill in stacked calm, its tiers rising in patient layers. The first thing you notice is how it doesn't try to impress you with height. It doesn't stab the sky. It spreads outward and upward in measured steps, like the whole point is the journey, not the performance. Fog drifts between you and the stone, turning edges soft. You take a few steps and the shape clarifies, a massive, step form that feels both engineered and strangely natural, like a hill that learned to become a pattern. The mist beads on your lashes. You blink slowly and the monument seems to arrive again, as if it's meeting you halfway. To the side, the horizon holds the sleeping bulk of a volcano. In the dimness it is only a deeper shade of dark, but it carries a weight your body understands. A low band of cloud wraps its middle, and above it the sky begins its gradual lightening, not sunrise yet, just the first gentle untying of night. You move toward the base along a simple path, and the world narrows to basics: stone underfoot, cool air in your nose, the faint rise of the ground. Your own sounds, breath, footfall, fabric, feel louder than they should, so you soften them. Not because anyone scolds you, but because the place quietly requests it. Close now, Borobudur reveals texture. The stones are not polished for your convenience. They hold tiny pits and seams, times freckles. Some blocks look darker, still drinking from earlier rain. Others are pale, catching whatever light the sky is willing to offer. You feel an unexpected comfort in the imperfect surface. It means this isn't an idea of history. It is history, with weather written into it. Above, the sky brightens another shade. Still no gold, still modest, pearl and slate, a careful gradient. A faint lighter band appears where the sun will eventually arrive, and the air seems to inhale in preparation. The volcano's outline becomes cleaner. The mist shifts. Everything here moves slowly, like it's practicing restraint. At the base, you find the first steps, broad, patient, slightly worn at the edges. Not ruined, just softened, like a well-used book. Your body recognizes a truth before your mind does. Once you start climbing, the day begins for real. Down here, you are still in ordinary time. Up there, you enter the spiral, and the temple starts guiding you with nothing but geometry and gravity. You pause, letting the cool stone and the cool air meet in you. Your shoulders drop a fraction. Your breathing settles into a slower rhythm. You let yourself be small for a moment, not in a sad way, more like a relief. You don't have to be the loudest thing in the world tonight. The mist thickens for a breath, drifting across the steps like a slow curtain. The upper shape blurs, then returns. In that brief blur, you imagine what it will feel like to climb by circling, to move upward without rushing, to learn a place by repeating it. One curve, one corner, one careful step. You place one foot on the first step. The stone is cool through the sole, and the quiet of it travels up your leg like a calm instruction. It is a tiny motion, almost nothing, but it carries a promise. You are about to let this dawn and this spiral teach your body how to slow down, and you are going to take it one gentle step at a time. Your foot settles on that first step, then the next, and you are committed in the quietest possible way. The stone is cool through the sole, and it sends a small instruction up your leg: slow down, don't perform. You shift your weight forward, and Borobudur stops being a silhouette and becomes a route that accepts you. At the threshold of the lower gallery, the air changes. Down at the base, mist wanders wherever it wants. Up here it is guided by corridors and corners, collecting in shade, thinning in open stretches, moving like something sleepy that already knows the shape of these walls. The monument doesn't only rise, it encloses. It gives your mind edges to rest against. Your shoes, whatever you've brought into this dream, sound softer than you expect. Maybe it's the damp. Maybe it's the way you instinctively lighten your steps, as if the stone can feel you. The first terrace opens into a long walkway bordered by carved surfaces, and you pause for a single breath to understand the design. A circuit with right-angled turns, meant to be repeated, meant to be walked. You begin the clockwise path without needing to announce it. The body remembers how to circle a sacred center, even if the mind tries to act too modern to be moved. You keep the heart of the monument to your right as you travel, and with that small choice the route clicks into place, like turning a key in a lock you didn't know you were holding. The walls come close. Not claustrophobic close, more like companionable. To your right, stone panels stretch ahead in framed sequences, the way pages hold paragraphs. Shadows sit in the grooves dark as ink. Highlights skim the raised edges, pale as ash. To your left, the outer boundary opens to the waking landscape, where the sky is slowly untying itself from night. This is the first lesson of the spiral relief walk. You don't read Borobudur like a book you can skim. You read it with your body. Meaning arrives in sequence because your feet carry you there. When you slow, details bloom. When you rush, the temple turns into a blur, and the blur turns into that familiar modern feeling of being somewhere without actually arriving. So you let your attention drop into the basics. one foot then the other. Breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. The stone under you is slightly slick with morning moisture, and it keeps you honest. If you hurry, your ankles will complain, and your brain will immediately pretend the complaint is a life crisis. You decide not to feed it. As you move, your eyes begin to sort the carvings into patterns. A procession arranged around an implied center. A cluster of figures leaning toward what matters. A repeated curve, a repeated gesture, like a theme returning in music. You don't need to name every story yet. You only need to notice that the stone holds ordinary life as carefully as it holds the sacred. Hands carrying, faces listening, bodies working, motion translated into stillness. The light changes with each step. A panel looks flat, then suddenly deepens as your angle shifts and shadow redraws the scene. Clarity here isn't something you get once and keep. It's something you earn again and again by adjusting your distance, your patience, your willingness to look twice. At the first corner you turn right, and the world rotates with you. The circuit continues, familiar but freshly framed. The volcano on the horizon shifts position in your peripheral vision, now caught in a different opening. The mist loosens, then gathers again. Everything feels slow on purpose. You pass recesses where the stone is cooler, as if it has been storing night inside it. In some places the carvings are crisp, in others they are softened by weather and time, the way a well-used object becomes gentler without becoming less real. You think of all the feet that have made this same turn, all the bodies that carried their private weight through this same gray-blue hour. It doesn't make you dramatic. It makes you feel accompanied. Even your sarcasm behaves. It shows up. Your brain still wants to joke about spiritual cardio and questionable stair design, but it shows up with a yawn, not a bite. The monument doesn't mind your humor. It only asks that you keep circling. The gallery subtly guides where your gaze lands. Sometimes the reliefs pull you close, asking for the intimacy of inspection. Sometimes the open air on the left calls you outward, reminding you that the temple is also landscape and weather, volcano and dawn. You learn to let your attention swing between them, inward to the carved world, outward to the breathing world, back and forth, until the motion itself becomes calming. You complete another straight stretch. Another corner. The circuit begins to feel familiar, not boring, but steady, like walking a hallway in a house you're just starting to trust. You can sense that the path will rise in layers, that the walk will keep spiraling upward in patient increments. But for now, on this first terrace, you stay with the simplest instruction: keep the center to your right, keep moving at a human pace, and let the story arrive one carved breath at a time. You keep circling, and the stone begins to behave less like architecture and more like a slow-moving film strip. The walkway holds you at just the right distance, close enough to feel the reliefs, far enough to see the scenes breathe as whole compositions. Your eyes stop skimming and start collecting. A hand raised in blessing. A head bowed in attention. A pair of feet angled mid-step, forever caught between leaving and arriving. The carvings unspool beside you in long sequences, framed panel by panel, each one separated by borders that feel like quiet pauses. You notice how repetition works here, not as boredom, but as a heartbeat. Lotus forms return again and again, not always identical. Sometimes tight as a bud, sometimes open and generous, sometimes only hinted at in a curve. You see the same posture repeated across different scenes, the same tilt of the chin, the same calm bend of the wrist, as if the temple is teaching you a language by letting you overhear it. Some panels feel ceremonial, figures arranged in careful order, faces turned toward a central presence you can almost feel even when the stone has softened. Other panels are startlingly domestic. Someone carries a bundle against the hip. Someone leans forward with the practical concentration of work. There are animals tucked into corners like afterthoughts. Dogs, birds, the ordinary witnesses of a human day. And threaded through it all is motion, the suggestion of cloth moving, water rippling, a procession flowing in the direction your feet insist on taking. You find yourself walking more slowly without deciding to. The reliefs reward the patient. When you linger, new layers appear. Tiny carved patterns on fabric, the texture of hair, the careful geometry of jewelry. You can almost hear the chisel work in your imagination, the tap-tap-tap of devotion disguised as craftsmanship. The stone holds a paradox. It is heavy and permanent, yet it is full of fleeting things, gestures, glances, the soft comedy of everyday life. Light helps too. Dawn is still shy, but it keeps changing its angle by the minute, and the carvings change with it. A face that looked blank and flat gray suddenly gains expression when shadow finds the eye socket. A palm that looked like a simple shape becomes tender when the ridge catches a thin line of brightness. You realize you are not only reading stone, you are reading shadow, reading time, reading the atmosphere itself. As you round another corner, a sequence repeats a motif you've started to recognize: cause and consequence, action and return. Not in a scolding way, more like a gentle reminder that nothing you do is truly isolated. A scene of generosity. A scene of struggle. A scene of calm aftermath. You don't need to label it as doctrine to feel it land. Your own mind, with its habit of rehearsing regrets, tries to tense up. You let it soften instead. The temple isn't demanding confession, it's offering perspective. You notice how the artists carve attention into the figures. Some faces are turned outward, needing the viewer. Some are turned inward, focused on what's happening in their own world. Many are angled toward one another in a web of shared focus, as if community is not a theme but a default setting. Even the background details, trees, roof lines, waves, support that sense of connection. Nothing floats alone. Everything is held. The more you look, the more you see the little tells that make this place human. A slight asymmetry in a repeated pattern. A corner where time has eroded the stone into softness, like fingers rubbing the edge of a favorite coin. A figure whose expression feels almost playful, as if the carver allowed themselves one private joke 8 centuries ago, knowing you'd never be able to prove it. You smile quietly. Your body stays slow. The smile feels like it belongs here. There are moments when the story becomes too dense to take in at once. Your attention flickers, tired in that familiar way, and you can feel your modern brain wanting the shortcut version, the summary, the "just tell me what it means." You resist the urge to rush. Meaning here is not a caption. It's a walk. You take one panel, then the next, letting them stack gently in your mind like folded cloth. You start to sense that the reliefs aren't only describing events, they are shaping your pace. The scenes of travel make you feel the rhythm of travel. The scenes of stillness teach you how to pause. The scenes of bustle remind you that devotion can live inside noise, and that quiet can live inside you even when the world is loud. This is, in its own stone way, a kind of training, soft, repetitive, almost hypnotic. Your fingers hover near the carvings but don't touch. Not because you're afraid of breaking something, but because you can feel that this surface holds many hands already. The hands that made it, the hands that protected it, the hands that came here with prayers too tired for words. You let your own hands rest at your sides, warm inside your sleeves, and you keep moving. By the time you reach the end of another stretch, the sequence beside you has become less like a set of pictures and more like a river. You are inside its current now, carried by the loop, by the turn, by the steady instruction to keep the center close and let the story do its work, one carved breath after another. You round the next corner and the river of carvings continues, but your attention lifts away from the stone for the first time in a while. It isn't distraction. Someone is already here in the gallery ahead of you, moving with the calm efficiency of a person who has done this 1,000 mornings and doesn't need to announce it. A small group appears out of the dim mist the way the mist does, quietly, as if they belong to the air. One carries a broom made of bundled fibers, sweeping water beads and grit toward the edge in slow strokes that sound like hush. Another holds a cloth bag and a folded wrap, hands neat and practiced, clothing in soft, earthy tones. You instinctively slow. Not because they demand it, but because their pace teaches you. They move as if the temple is not a trophy but a living place that deserves the courtesy of unhurried feet. They stay to one side, leaving room without pushing you into it. They angle their bodies away from the reliefs, careful not to brush carved edges with careless sleeves. When they step, they place the whole foot down, grounded, like greeting the stone instead of conquering it. You, meanwhile, are trying to be respectful without turning it into a performance. You keep your hands close. You keep your breath soft. You keep the center of the monument to your right. And still your modern habits try to surface. Take a photo, rush the corner, optimize the loop. One of the locals notices the smallest wobble in your direction at a turn. There is no scolding, no exaggerated instruction. They simply pause and pivot their own body in a smooth clockwise sweep, then continue, letting the movement itself be the lesson. Your feet understand immediately. You adjust and fall back into the shared current, a little humbled by how elegant nonverbal guidance can be. The temple feels different when you are not alone with it. The reliefs beside you stop being art and start being part of a relationship between people and place. You watch the broom skim the stone, watch the careful way it avoids seams and corners where water collects. It's maintenance, yes, but it also reads like devotion disguised as ordinary work. And you notice what keeps Borobudur from becoming museum dead. Nobody climbs onto ledges for a dramatic pose. Nobody presses fingers into the carvings to steal texture. When someone pauses to look, they step back rather than crowd in. The quiet isn't enforced by signs, it's carried by behavior, passed along the same way you pass a bowl at dinner, gently, automatically. A faint scent threads through the damp air, smoke thin and sweet woody, and then disappears. It doesn't fill the space. It only marks it, like a soft underline. At a section of wall where the carving is especially intricate, one of the locals stops. They don't point with a sharp finger. Instead, they tilt their chin and open their palm, inviting your eyes rather than commanding them. You lean in just enough to see a tiny pattern within a border, a small seam tucked where a rushing visitor would never look. The gesture says, without words, this is worth your patience. You take the hint and soften your gaze. The relief deepens, not because you learned a fact, but because you learn how to look. Light has started to thin the gray, and shadow now shapes faces, hands, and folds of cloth in a way that feels almost tender. It is strange, realizing the temple isn't only carved by chisels, it is carved again every morning by weather. A small practical test arrives when the walkway narrows at another corner. You and the group would naturally meet in the same pinch point, and for a heartbeat your body wants to do that awkward human thing. Half step, hesitation, the little panic of not knowing the etiquette. They solve it without drama. The sweeper shifts outward, creating a clean lane. Another slows, eyes lowered, leaving you space as if it costs nothing. You pass through with a small bow of the head, and you don't make it weird by radiating gratitude like a spotlight. Respect, you realize, doesn't have to be theatrical. It can be tiny. It can be practical. It can be as simple as not treating ancient stone like your personal stage. You continue behind them for a while, and the rhythm steadies you. They stop at places where moisture pools, where moss might try to settle, where a seam needs clearing so rainwater can drain the way it should. In those pauses you see another layer of time, not just the centuries behind the monument, but the present tense work that keeps it standing. Your thoughts try to inflate into something grand, because that's what your brain does when it's nervous about feeling moved. But the temple, through these quiet hosts, offers something more useful, a model of how to be in a place without consuming it, how to move through beauty without grabbing it, how to let reverence be light enough to carry. The sky brightens another shade. The stone warms in tiny increments. The mist thins at the edges, and the locals continue ahead, their movements almost blending into the architecture, as if they are part of the monument's breathing. You keep circling with them, quiet as you can be, steady as you can manage, letting their wordless etiquette settle into your muscles like a calm habit you might, if you're lucky, take back into the rest of your life. You keep circling until the gallery's hush starts to feel wearable, like a shawl of stone and fog. It would be poetic to fall asleep here, and equally poetic to wake up with your legs cramping into a new religion. Your body suggests something more sensible, warmth and food, before your knees stage a tiny rebellion. So you let the spiral release you for a moment. You descend toward the gate where the monument's cool weight loosens into open air. Mist thins into strands. Somewhere nearby, a small fire breathes, and the scent is gentle, woody, faintly sweet, like morning being coaxed into existence instead of yanked awake. Borobudur stays behind you, steady in the dim, unbothered that you've stepped away. It knows you'll come back. Stalls gather in quiet clusters, modest and practical. Cloth canopies droop with dew. Pots sit with lids slightly ajar, already exhaling. People move with dawn efficiency. No rushing, no show, just the soft choreography of setting out a day. A woman arranges bananas in neat curves. A man lifts a lid and steam unspools upward, curling and fading like a thought you almost remember. Another stacks small parcels wrapped in leaves, corners tucked with the tidy confidence of repetition. Hands wipe surfaces, sort fruit, tie knots in cloth pouches. The whole place smells like heat meeting patience. Your stomach responds, polite for half a second, then honest. You drift closer to the steam and choose something simple. A bowl of rice porridge, thin and comforting, topped with crisp bits that crackle under your spoon. You add one leaf-wrapped parcel of sticky rice with a savory center. And you take a cup of hot tea with a hint of ginger, enough to warm your chest without jolting you into daytime. You find a spot at the edge of the stalls where you can still see the temple's dark shape above the trees. It doesn't loom, it waits. Steam from your bowl rises and mingles with the strands of mist, and for a moment you can't tell what belongs to food and what belongs to weather. You like that. It makes breakfast feel less like a break, and more like another turn of the spiral, another ritual of taking what you need slowly, respectfully, without apologizing for being human. You cradle the cup in both hands. Heat seeps into your fingers, then into that tight space between your shoulders. Steam brushes your face in slow waves. You inhale, exhale, and your breath comes out quieter than it went in. You eat slowly, because the temple has been teaching you that speed is not a virtue here. The porridge tastes gentle, soft rice, mild broth, salt and balance. The leaf-wrapped parcel tastes faintly smoky, faintly sweet, like rain settling into warm soil. Each mouthful lands and stays. Your body, finally convinced you are not being chased by anything, relaxes its secret grip. Around you, the day keeps assembling itself from small actions. Someone pours water carefully, keeping the hems of their trousers dry. Someone folds a cloth, wipes again, then folds it tighter. A pair of hands counts coins and ties them away. A broom whispers over stone, nudging damp grit aside. It's livelihood, yes, but it also feels like care, the same careful energy you saw inside the galleries, where a single step placed well can be a kind of respect. A vendor's fingers work the leaf parcels with quick precision, fold, tuck, press, tie. The motion repeats until it becomes soothing to watch, like waves making the same promise on a shore. You remember the reliefs, hands offering, hands carrying, hands building, and it lands that the temple isn't only telling stories about devotion. It's also quietly praising the people who keep a life going, the ones who rise early, feed others, sweep paths, count coins, fold cloth, and do the small work that makes big places possible. People arrive in quiet waves. Some come alone, eyes still foggy with sleep. Some come in small clusters, moving with that shared awareness where nobody needs to speak to stay together. A few carry offerings in woven baskets, flowers, leaves, small neat bundles, held close and steady. You don't pry. You just notice how one place can hold many intentions without forcing them into a single story. The sky brightens another shade. The volcano's silhouette sharpens, then softens as a cloud drifts across it like a slow hand. Color returns to the world, muted greens, wet browns, a pale gold edging the clouds, and your tea cools from hot to gently warm. A stray cat slides along the edge of a stall, tail lifted like a question mark. It sniffs the air near your food, decides you're not worth the effort, and strolls away with the calm arrogance of something that has never worried about productivity. You almost laugh. You keep it inside, a small warm vibration in your chest. When you finish, you don't jump up like you're late. You sit for a few breaths and let the warmth settle in your belly. You listen to the small sounds, the clink of a ladle, the hush of steam, the brush of a broom, and you realize how perfectly this belongs to the spiral above. The reliefs carve kings and pilgrims and laborers into one flow. Down here, the same truth lives in bowls, baskets, leaf parcels, and hands that show up before dawn. You wipe your fingers, set the cup down, and stand carefully. Your knees, previously suspicious of this entire spiral concept, feel slightly more cooperative. You turn back toward the steps, toward the galleries waiting in their patient loops. You are fed. You are warmer. And the spiral, steady, unbothered, welcomes you back without a single word. You step back through the gate, and the monument takes you in again, as if you never left. The warmth of breakfast still sits low in your stomach. Ginger steam, the quiet comfort of a bowl that didn't ask you to be impressive. Now the stone asks something even simpler. Be present, and stop flailing internally like a wet umbrella. The lower galleries hold a soft, shaded coolness that feels monastic by temperature alone. Dawn light has strengthened, but it arrives here filtered through corridors and corners, diluted into a gentle gray gold. You continue clockwise, keeping the center to your right, and the repeating turns begin to calm your nervous system the way steady waves calm a shoreline. No grand revelation, just consistency. There are more people now. Not crowds, not a stampede of selfie sticks, just a slow gathering of visitors who move with sleep still clinging to their shoulders. A few carry small bundles of flowers or leaves in woven baskets. Some pause with hands held still, eyes lowered, as if listening to something the stone says more clearly than words. Others simply walk, letting the loop itself be the practice. This is where you learn that stillness isn't only sitting. Stillness can be a way of moving. You let your steps become more even, heel, roll, place. You let your breathing match the corridor length. Inhale across one panel, exhale across the next. The temple gives you just enough structure to keep your mind from sprinting away. The reliefs beside you shift in your perception. Earlier you hunted details like a hungry bird. Now you let them arrive without grabbing. A carved figure holds an offering. You don't rush to decode it. A procession turns toward a central presence. You don't need to name the doctrine. You simply let the gesture be what it is, attention given outward, not hoarded inward. In the shallow light, the stone feels less like an exhibit and more like a steady companion, patient and indifferent to your anxiety. In a recessed stretch of walkway, the air turns cooler, almost cave-like. Moisture beads along the base of the wall, and the stone smells faintly mineral, like rain remembered. You slow there, not because a rule tells you to, but because your body likes the shade. For a moment you stand still and let the coolness press gently against your skin. A few steps away, someone kneels on the stone with careful posture, back straight, head slightly bowed. Their stillness isn't dramatic. It's practical, like setting down a heavy bag without making a scene. You feel an odd tenderness toward them, and also an odd envy, because you realize how much energy you burn pretending you're fine when you're not. You don't imitate. You simply let their calm remind you that it's possible. You return to walking, and the loop carries you forward. The corners come predictably now, and predictability, surprise, does not bore you. It steadies you. Each right turn is a small reset. Each straight stretch is a quiet runway where your thoughts can land softly instead of crashing. Somewhere above, birds begin their morning negotiations, and the sound floats down in thin threads. You hear a distant broom again, that soft whisper of fibers across stone, and it pulls your mind back to the caretakers you saw earlier, moving like incense smoke. You remember their wordless lesson: don't touch, don't crowd, don't make this place your personal stage, and you feel grateful that the temple's etiquette is carried by people, not enforced by scolding signs. As the light grows, the carvings gain depth. You notice how the artist stacks scenes, foreground figures crisp, background architecture like a suggestion. The more you accept that pace, the more your mind stops demanding instant meaning. You begin to feel how the monument is designed as a path from the world of busy details toward a quieter center, step by step, circle by circle. You catch a glimpse through the open side of the gallery, fields breathing under mist, trees dark with dew, and the volcano's slope now clearer, a patient mass under pale sky. It doesn't feel like distraction. It feels like a reminder that this temple is planted in the same world that feeds you and tires you out. Stone and soil, carved story and living weather, together. Back inside the corridor, you pass a small niche where offerings have been placed. Humble, easy to miss. A few petals cling to damp stone. Nothing looks staged for an audience. You feel the temptation to romanticize it, to turn it into a perfect symbol. You let that temptation drift away. The real thing is quieter than your imagination, and that's part of its power. You keep circling, letting your breath smooth out. At some point your inner commentary tries to restart. What you should do tomorrow, what you forgot, what you didn't do perfectly today. You notice that the way you notice mist, present, shifting, not worth wrestling. You come back to the stone under your feet, the shade on your skin, the steady clockwise curve. And in that simple return, you find the monastic thing you came for, not a costume, not a performance, not a sudden enlightenment that would look good in a caption. Just a quiet training in attention. Just you, walking a carved spiral at dawn, learning how to be calm in a way that doesn't require you to disappear. You keep circling until the corridors begin to thin, and then, almost without ceremony, the temple changes its mind about walls. The square galleries that have been holding you like steady hands loosen their grip. The reliefs taper off. The borders that kept the story marching beside your shoulder fall away, and you step into a higher tier where the air feels wider, as if the monument is teaching you to breathe with your whole ribs. The route stays clockwise and patient, but now the sky presses closer. Dawn has matured from gray into pale gold, and the light no longer has to squeeze through corners. It arrives openly, sliding across stone, then lifting, like a slow eyelid. Ahead, the first bell stupas appear. They rise from the circular terrace like a field of stone lanterns, rounded, perforated, symmetrical. Each one is shaped like a bell, but not the loud kind your phone uses to ruin your peace. These bells don't ring. They hold. They sit in calm rows, spaced so you can walk among them without crowding, the way you might move through trees in a garden where the gardener also happens to be a philosopher. You step closer and the details resolve. Each stupa is a shell of stone with openings cut through it, a lattice that looks simple until you notice how precisely it repeats. Some perforations form diamonds, some squares, and as you shift your angle the patterns change the way woven fabric changes when you tilt it toward light. Shadow collects inside the hollow forms, deep and cool, and brightness spills through in thin patches that slide over the terrace floor. You wander between two stupas and pause, because the shadow pattern at your feet is unexpectedly beautiful in a humble way. It isn't trying to be art. It's just geometry meeting sunrise. Diamonds of shadow, little windows of brightness, a net cast by stone. The breeze moves, your body shifts, and the pattern drifts a fraction, like it's breathing, You realize the stupas aren't only objects to look at, they are instruments that play light. If you lean a little, you can glimpse what's inside one of them, not fully, not as a prize, but as a suggestion. A seated figure in the dim, softened by shadow, present and unreachable at the same time. Your brain tries to turn this into a challenge. Can you see it? Can you capture it? Can you get it? And you gently refuse. You don't need to win against the temple at dawn. You've already lost in the best way. Your pulse is slower, your shoulders are lower, and your thoughts are finally walking instead of sprinting. Up here the air is cooler again, but not the damp corridor coolness. This is open sky coolness, breeze that slides across your cheek and dries the last of the mist from your lashes. The volcano line on the horizon becomes clearer between the stupas, framed by curved stone and lattice holes. It's a strange kind of view, massive landscapes seen through intentional gaps, like the world itself is being edited into calm. You continue along the circular path, and the absence of reliefs becomes its own lesson. Down below, the temple held you close and told you stories carved into walls, lives, choices, consequences, the loop of human doing. Up here, the walls fall away, and the teaching becomes quieter. There is less to read and more to feel, wind, light, space that doesn't demand. Your footsteps sound different on this terrace. The openness lets the sound lift and vanish fast, like the air swallows it. You hear faint movement from other early visitors, but it arrives as soft fabric and careful saws, not chatter. It's as if everyone up here has agreed, without signing anything, that noise would be unnecessary work. You stop at a stupa where the perforations cast a crisp pattern, and you let your eyes follow the shapes. Diamond, 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 then a slight softening at the curve, where thickness changes the shadow's edge. You remember the leaf-wrapped breakfast parcel in your hands earlier, the way the folds repeated but never matched perfectly. It's the same craft logic, repetition for steadiness, variation for life. The sun strengthens by a small increment. The terrace warms at the edges. Stupa tops catch a faint honeyed glow, while the hollows stay cool and dark, keeping their seated figures half hidden. The contrast feels deliberate, even if it's simply physics. Revelation offered slowly, privacy respected. You walk on, weaving gently between bell forms. They're tall enough to feel like companions and low enough to keep the horizon visible. Their rounded bodies break the wind into softer currents, so the breeze arrives in waves instead of blasts. With each wave, your mind loosens another thread, tomorrow's tasks, yesterday's regrets, the little humiliations you replay for sport. They don't disappear, they just stop demanding the microphone. At the next curve you glance down the slope of terraces you've climbed. The squared galleries below look like a step map, orderly, grounded, story-heavy. Up here, the circles feel like breath. It isn't that one level is better. It's that they work together. The carved world of action below, the open world of stillness above. You continue the circular route until it settles into your muscles. Lattice shadows keep sliding. The breeze keeps smoothing. The bell stupas keep holding their quiet secrets without teasing you. Somewhere ahead, the sky brightens towards something more golden, and you can feel the day preparing to arrive fully. For now, you stay in this in-between, walking among stone bells that never ring, watching light and shadow breathe through their openings, and letting your own mind learn, finally, how to do the same. The light keeps changing while you walk, And you don't notice it all at once. You feel it the way you feel your body relaxing, in tiny releases, in subtle warmth gathering where there was only cool before. The bell stupas around you begin to glow at their rounded shoulders, and the lattice shadows at your feet sharpen into crisp patterns, as if the sun is quietly increasing the resolution of the world. You reach a point on the circular terrace where the horizon opens wider between the stone forms. Here the temple stops being a maze of corridors and becomes a balcony. The air is clearer. The mist that was clinging to the lower levels now drifts outward, pooling in distant folds of land like a pale sea. And on that sea, the silhouettes of volcanoes rise, dark, calm, almost too large to be real. Merapi, the most famous shape in this line of sleeping giants, sits with a kind of restrained menace, not active in this moment, just present, like a reminder that the earth has moods of its own. Behind it, other peaks shoulder into view, softened by haze. The sky above them is no longer gray. It is a gradient, cool blue at the top, milky gold near the horizon, with thin ribbons of cloud catching light like brushed metal. You stop, because the temple gives you permission to stop. The circular path doesn't push you forward. It holds you in a gentle loop where pausing feels natural, not like you're blocking traffic in a hallway of deadlines. The sunrise begins in earnest. At first it's subtle, light thickening, colors warming, the mist turning from white to faint peach. Then, with the calm inevitability of something that does not care about your schedule, the sun's glow spills into the valley. The volcano edges sharpen. The clouds brighten at their rims. The mist begins to look less like fog and more like illuminated breath. The stupas around you respond instantly. Their stone skin catches gold along the curves, while the perforations stay dark, keeping the interior cool and shadowed. The lattice patterns at your feet become a moving tapestry, diamonds of shade, little islands of brightness, shifting every time you tilt your head or shift your weight. It's like the temple is playing a quiet trick, showing you that even still objects are never truly still when light is alive. You take a slow breath and let it last longer than usual. The air smells cleaner up here, less earthy and more open, wind with a faint trace of distant vegetation, warmed by the first sun. Your chest rises, falls. Your thoughts, which usually snatch at moments like this, capture it, explain it, post it, arrive slower. They watch instead of grabbing. A few other visitors stand scattered around the terrace. Their shapes are quiet punctuation marks in a wide sentence. Some hold their hands together in stillness. Some look outward, faces softened, as if the view is pressing gently against their foreheads. No one needs to speak for the moment to feel shared. You sense that this is one of those rare human agreements. When the world is this beautiful, you don't have to decorate it with noise. Your inner sarcasm tries to stir, because it's allergic to sincerity. It wants to say something like, "Wow, yes, nature, very impressive, 5 stars." But it can't muster the energy. Even your cynicism has gone a bit sleepy. So it settles into a gentler humor. You stand here thinking you're looking at the sunrise, but really the sunrise is looking at you, testing whether you can stay quiet for longer than 10 seconds without spiraling into your mental inbox. You do. Mostly. The temple beneath you feels warm in patches now, where the sun lands. Stone that was cold at your first step is beginning to hold heat, slowly, like an animal waking. You place your palm near the surface without touching, feeling warmth radiate upward. You remember the shaded galleries below and their cool, monastic hush, and it strikes you that the temple offers a whole gradient of experience: cool shadow into warm openness, dense story into wide silence, square into circle. The volcano horizon shifts as the mist moves. At moments, Merapi's base disappears behind glowing cloud. At moments, it reappears, dark and clean-edged. The valley looks like it's breathing, inhaling mist, exhaling light. It's not dramatic in a violent way. It's dramatic in the way a slow orchestra swell is dramatic, steady, inevitable, almost unbearably gentle. You walk again, because standing too long in beauty can make you feel exposed. You continue along the curve among the bell stupas, letting the sunrise follow you like a warm hand on your shoulder. Light slips through the perforations and draws patterns across your clothes, across your forearms, across the stone. For a moment you are literally patterned by Borobudur, shadow lattice laid over you like a temporary tattoo, a reminder that you are part of the scene, not just a spectator. At a point where the terrace widens, you look down again. The lower levels are now clearer, the stacked squares, the relief-lined corridors, the paths you walked when the world was still dim. From up here, they look like a map of patience. And you realize that sunrise isn't only a view. It's a completion of the walk. You started in mist and cool shadow, in slow reading of stone stories. Now you're in light, in open air, in the simple act of looking far. This is the moment that could turn into a cliché if you force it. So you don't. You let it be what it is, a quiet shock of beauty, an unexpected softness in your chest, a feeling like your body is remembering how to be alive without being frantic. The gold deepens. The mist thins at the edges. The volcanoes hold their silhouettes like calm guardians. And you, standing among bell stupas that never ring, let the sunrise settle into you the way warmth settles into stone, slowly, steadily, without asking permission. When you finally move again, it isn't because the view stops being beautiful. It's because beauty this wide starts to feel like a mirror, and you can only stand in front of yourself for so long before you want to pretend you're just walking, like a normal person who definitely has everything under control. So you drift back along the circular path, still clockwise, still unhurried, and you begin noticing the other kind of presence up here. The human hands that keep this whole stone spiral from slowly surrendering to rain, moss, and time's quiet hunger. You see them first by their tools, not by their faces. A soft brush set down on a cloth. A small bucket carried carefully, not sloshing. A folded rag tucked into a belt. There is no loud work, no power tools shrieking into the morning. Preservation here moves like the dawn did, gradual, respectful, almost shy. A caretaker kneels near a seam where two stones meet, fingers working with delicate precision. They lift a thin line of debris from the gap, tiny grit, damp leaves, the beginnings of moss. Their motions are slow enough to look ceremonial even when they're simply practical. You watch, and it hits you again. Ancient is not a permanent state. Ancient survives because someone keeps showing up in the present. You wander closer, keeping space, letting your footsteps soften. The caretaker doesn't look up immediately. Their attention is on the stone. When they do glance your way, it isn't suspicion. It's quick assessment. Are you careful? Are you respectful? Are you about to do something silly? You pass the test by doing the easiest thing in the world, nothing dramatic. They return to their work, and you watch the tiny changes they create. A seam clears. Water will drain better. A slick patch becomes less treacherous. A surface looks the same as it did a minute ago, but it's safer, cleaner, less vulnerable. Preservation often looks like this. Results so subtle that only the place itself knows what you did. Another worker stands a little further away, looking across a cluster of stupas with an expression you recognize, focused, slightly worried, but calm. They are scanning for problems that most visitors would never see: hairline cracks, pooling water, a piece of stone loosened by weather. Their gaze moves like a doctor's, checking, noticing, remembering. It makes you think of the reliefs below again, the carved hands carrying, building, offering. The artists immortalized labor in stone because labor was always part of the sacred. Here, the sacred survives because of labor. Not glamorous labor, not "this will go viral" labor. Quiet work that happens whether anyone claps or not. You follow the curve and find a small staging area tucked out of the main walking line. It's modest, cloths laid neatly, brushes arranged, maybe a simple container of water. Nothing feels invasive. The tools look almost like extensions of the monument, soft against stone, careful, patient. A faint smell rises, wet mineral, a touch of earthy green, and something else, the clean scent of damp cloth. It reminds you of mornings when someone cleaned a room before you woke up, leaving everything refreshed without leaving evidence of themselves. That kind of care. The kind that doesn't demand praise. You watch as a worker lightly brushes a section where lichen threatens to cling. The brush is gentle, almost apologetic. You can see the restraint in the wrist, enough to remove what harms the stone, not enough to damage what time has already softened. It's surgery with a broom, essentially. You feel a strange gratitude, because you realize how easily places like this could be ruined by impatience and ignorance. How easily tourism could become a slow form of violence if nobody tended the boundaries. And this is where your own small problem starts to form, quietly, like a cloud gathering without warning. Because as you move among the stupas, warmed by sunrise and softened by that sense of shared reverence, you feel your pocket and realize a familiar absence. Not a dramatic one, no gasp, no cinematic zoom, but a subtle shift in your body. That moment your hand reaches for something out of habit and finds only fabric. A small token, something you carried into this walk, maybe a ticket stub, a charm, a folded note you didn't even remember bringing, suddenly isn't where it should be. It's not expensive. That's not the point. It's meaningful in that private way, a tiny object that anchors you, that reminds you you're still you, even when you're wandering through ancient stone spirals at dawn like a person in a dream. Your brain immediately tries to do what it always does, inflate the issue into a catastrophe. It starts running a fast, unhelpful script. What if it's gone? What if someone took it? What if you're careless? What if this ruins the whole morning? You feel the spike of adrenaline, and you hate it, because the whole point of being here was to stop vibrating like a phone on a table. You take one slow breath, then another, and you remember the lesson the caretakers are living. Calm is a kind of maintenance. If you panic, you'll stomp, you'll rush, you'll stop seeing details. If you stay soft, you'll notice what you missed. So you don't sprint. You don't spiral harder than the spiral itself. You simply pause in a patch of sunlight, among stone stupas and lattice shadows, and let your mind settle back into the pace of preservation. You think through your last movements, where you stopped for sunrise, where you leaned close to a stupa, where you turned, where you looked down over the terraces. A few spots surface as possibilities. You decide to retrace gently, because the temple has already taught you the method: repetition, patience, attention to small seams. And as you begin that careful retracing, you glance once more at the caretaker kneeling by the stones, doing their slow work in the brightening morning, and you quietly borrow their mindset. Find the tiny thing. Clear the seam. Let the day keep breathing. You begin the gentle retracing, not with urgency, but with that borrowed caretaker calm. One step placed carefully, one breath kept long, eyes scanning without strain. The bell stupas sit around you like patient witnesses, their lattice patterns still drawing soft geometry across the stone. The sun is higher now, enough to warm the terrace in patches, and you tell yourself, very quietly, that losing a small token is not the end of the world. The world, unfortunately, chooses this exact moment to change its mood. At first you feel it as a shift in air pressure, a subtle heaviness in the breeze, like someone placed a damp cloth over the sky. The light dulls by a fraction. The gold that was pooling on stone shoulders turns paler, more cautious. You glance outward and see the mist thickening again, not rising from the valley this time but gathering from the side, darker clouds sliding in like a slow, uninvited thought. And then the first drops land. They don't fall dramatically. They arrive as a tapping, soft beads at first, cool against your forearm, then more confident. The stone, which had been drying, starts to darken in scattered spots, like ink spreading through paper. You look up at the clouds and you almost respect their timing. Rain in Java doesn't ask whether you're in the middle of a spiritual moment. It simply happens, because weather is the ultimate reminder that you are not in charge. The drops thicken into a steady rain. Not a violent storm yet, but enough to change everything. The terrace begins to shine with moisture, and the bell stupas, once warm and honeyed, become slick and dark again. The lattice shadows fade as light flattens. The world's contrast softens into a damp monochrome. Your first instinct is to hurry, to protect yourself, to outrun inconvenience. But the stone immediately argues back. The slickness underfoot is real. The terrace becomes treacherous in the way only ancient stone can be, beautiful, steady, and extremely willing to let your ankle learn a lesson. So you slow down even more. You take shorter steps. You keep your feet under your hips. You let your weight settle before you shift it. You pay attention to where water pools and where it runs in thin streams along seams. Your whole body turns into a careful instrument, tuned to balance. Nearby, other visitors respond with the same quiet intelligence. No one panics. People drift toward areas where the stupas break the wind a little, where the curve of stone offers mild shelter. Someone opens a small rain cover, but even that motion is restrained, like they don't want to startle the monument. The caretakers, of course, become even more focused. You see one step quickly, but not hurriedly, toward a place where water is pooling near a seam. They guide the flow with a broom and a gentle nudge, clearing debris so the drainage works as intended. It's the same work as before, just now the stakes are higher. This is preservation in real time, in wet weather, in the exact conditions that slowly eat stone. You are suddenly aware of your own shoes. Are they gripping enough? Are they slick? The wet stone reflects light in patches, and it becomes hard to judge which areas are safe and which are dangerously glossy. You make a mental note. If you slip, you will become a cautionary tale told quietly by someone later, and you will deserve every ounce of your own embarrassment. Rain threads into your hair and cools your scalp. Your sleeves darken at the edges. The air smells fresh and mineral again, stronger now, with the earthy note of wet stone waking. The volcanoes in the distance blur behind the rain, their silhouettes dissolving into the low cloud. The view that was so crisp and golden is now soft and veiled, like the world has lowered its voice again. You keep moving along your retracing path, scanning the ground with careful eyes. Your missing token could have slipped out anywhere. A turn, a pause, a moment you lean forward to peer through a stupa lattice. The rain complicates everything. Wet stone makes small objects harder to see. Water carries light debris away. Your mind tries to restart its panic script. What if it's gone forever now, washed away, ruined, lost because you chose this exact morning to be sentimental? You take a breath and refuse to amplify it. Instead, you do what the temple's design has been teaching you since the base: repetition and patience. You move back to the spot where you stood for sunrise, judging by the alignment of stupas and the way the terrace curves. You stop there, not in the middle of the walking line, but slightly to the side. You look down slowly, letting your gaze sweep the stone in deliberate arcs, like a broom. Rain strikes the terrace in tiny circles, rippling puddles that collect in shallow depressions. You watch the water's movement. If your token is something light, it might have been nudged toward a seam or an edge. If it's heavier, it might be sitting in a small pocket where water gathers but doesn't flow. You follow the streams with your eyes. You look where the water goes, because water is honest. It reveals the landscape of the stone. A faint glint catches your attention, just for a heartbeat. You shift your head, and it disappears. You shift again, and it returns, a tiny reflective edge near a joint between stones, half obscured by a thin line of water. You don't lunge. You step closer carefully, testing each foot placement. You crouch, keeping your balance low and steady, and you peer into the seam. There it is, your small token, lodged just enough to stay put, wet but intact, clinging to the stone's tiny irregularity like it also wants to survive the morning. Relief washes through you, warm and ridiculous in the middle of rain. You feel the temptation to celebrate. Big exhale, big laugh, big triumphant moment. But you keep it small. You pinch the token between your fingers and lift it gently, as if it might tear the morning if you act too loud. It's damp. It's real. It's back in your hand. You tuck it safely away, deeper this time, in a pocket you trust, and you let your shoulders drop. The rain keeps falling. The stone stays slick. The temple remains patient. Your little problem, the one your brain tried to inflate into a tragedy, is resolved in the simplest way, by slowing down enough to see. And now, with the token recovered and the rain still turning the terrace into a shimmering caution sign, you have learned the next part of Borobudur's lesson. Calm is not just for aesthetics. Calm keeps you upright. You stand back up carefully, token secure, fingers still feeling the small cold dampness of it. Relief settles through you in a slow wave, the way warmth settles into stone, quietly, without needing applause. The rain continues as if nothing important happened, which is exactly the point. The world doesn't rearrange itself around your tiny panic. It just keeps falling in droplets and making the terrace gleam. You begin to move again, not to get away from the rain, like a dramatic creature made of sugar, but to find steadier ground and let your body stay safe. The bell stupas around you bead with water. Their curved surfaces shine darker now, and the perforations hold little pockets of shadow that look deeper in the flattened light. Your mind tries one last time to turn this into a story about your incompetence. It whispers that you should have been more careful, that losing the token even briefly proves something about you, that a calmer person wouldn't have done that. Your mind is very committed to being a bad coach. You let the thought pass. You've spent too long in these terraces to let your own brain heckle you without consequences. The temple's patience is contagious. You decide to treat yourself the way the caretakers treat the stone, gently, attentively, without unnecessary force. As you approach the edge of the circular terrace, you notice a caretaker watching the walkway with that same calm, scanning gaze. They're looking down, not at the clouds. They're checking the stone, where water runs, where debris gathers, where moss might get encouraged by all this moisture. Their posture is relaxed but precise, like someone who knows the difference between nothing to worry about and watch this carefully. You keep your steps measured, and in doing so you suddenly understand something about your missing token. You weren't careless in an evil way. You were simply inside a moment, watching sunrise, inhaling beauty, letting the lattice shadows tattoo your sleeves. Your fingers loosen their grip without you noticing. That's not moral failure. That's being human in a place that gently pulls you out of your usual vigilance. The rain deepens for a minute, drumming a little more loudly on stone and cloth. Water streaks down the stupas. The air cools again. The volcano horizon is completely veiled now, and the valley beyond Borobudur becomes a soft blur. The temple feels closer in this weather, more intimate, like being inside a large, damp breath. You drift toward the descending path that leads back to the squared galleries, thinking you might find better shelter there. The circular terraces are beautiful in sun, but in rain they become wide, exposed, and slick. Down below, the corridors offer shade and edges, places where water runs less freely. As you begin your descent, you see another small cluster of visitors negotiating the steps with cautious intelligence. Nobody rushes. People give each other space. A hand hovers near a railing, not grabbing but ready, the way you might hover a hand near a sleeping child's shoulder, just in case. You follow, keeping your balance low. The steps are worn smooth by time and feet, and rain turns smoothness into risk. You place your foot and feel it grip, then shift weight only when you know it holds. The rhythm is slow enough to be soothing, slow enough to make you feel like you're walking with the temple, not against it. Halfway down, you pause under a slight overhang where the stone offers minimal shelter. The rain sound changes here, softer, more distant, like it's happening to someone else. You take a breath and listen. Water drips in steady intervals from a corner seam, plink, plink, plink. It's so consistent it could be a metronome. Your mind, which is always eager to attach meaning to any pattern, tries to turn the dripping into a sign. You let it be what it is, physics and gravity. And still, the steadiness of it calms you. There's something deeply reassuring about a world that keeps doing what it does without consulting your anxiety. You continue down and re-enter the square galleries. The corridors are darker now, cooler, the air thick with damp stone scent. Rainwater makes the relief panels shine in subtle places, darkening the grooves, sharpening the carved lines. The shadows return, deeper than they were in the open terrace, and the reliefs feel alive again, their textures amplified by moisture. You remember your token and, without pulling it out, you touch the pocket where it rests. The gesture is small, almost silly, a reassurance to your nervous system. It answers with a soft relaxation. You don't need to keep checking. You can let it be. Another caretaker passes, carrying a cloth and a small tool pouch. Their movement is efficient, quiet. They stop near a corner and use the cloth to wipe a patch where water has pooled, not because visitors would complain, but because wet stone is a risk, and risk here is always dealt with before it becomes trouble. Watching them, you realize the temple isn't only a place you visit. It's a place that's continuously cared for, continuously negotiated with weather and time. Your little panic was a tiny version of that ongoing negotiation. You lost something, you didn't panic, you retraced, you recovered, and you stayed gentle. You practiced preservation of your own calm. The rain begins to soften again, shifting from steady to lighter, as if the clouds are getting bored. The corridor's damp coolness remains, but the air feels less heavy. You keep walking, letting the loop carry you onward, your token safe, your steps steady, and your mind, finally, less interested in inventing disasters. The rain thins into something quieter, still present, but no longer insisting on itself. It becomes a soft hiss outside the corridors, a curtain you can hear without seeing. Inside the square galleries, moisture darkens the reliefs and makes their carved lines feel newly inked, as if the stories have been redrawn just for you. You keep circling, and the themes you sensed earlier begin to echo more clearly. Not as lectures, as patterns. A scene of giving, a scene of receiving, a scene of consequence, a scene of repair. The temple doesn't point a finger. It simply shows life looping back on itself, the way your own days do. Effort, mistake, apology, kindness, fatigue, small redemption, repeat. You find yourself thinking about the stalls outside, the hands folding leaf parcels, the broom whispering over stone, the caretakers scanning seams. These are not separate worlds. The reliefs contain the logic of everyday work, and everyday work keeps the reliefs from disappearing. You pass a panel where figures are carved in a tight cluster, all bodies angled toward one another, attention braided into a shared focus. Your mind quietly supplies the missing sound, hum, movement, living breath, even though the stone offers none. And because there is no dialogue here, no spoken explanation, you pay more attention to posture, to the way shoulders incline, to the direction of gaze. It becomes obvious that the most important speech in this temple is the way bodies communicate without words. You remember the caretaker's wordless clockwise pivot. You remember the vendor's hands folding and tying. You remember how you found your token by following water, not panic. Your brain offers a dry little joke. Look at you, learning lessons like a functional adult, and you let the humor land softly. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be awake. As you round another corner, the corridor opens slightly, giving you a glance outward. The valley beyond is still veiled, but the mist looks brighter now, as if the sun is returning behind the cloud cover. The rain has stopped arguing and started negotiating. You can feel it in the air, lighter, less heavy. The world is drying slowly. Back inside, your shoes make a faint, controlled sound on stone. You keep the pace that has become your default here, steady, respectful, slightly slower than your normal life would allow. The reliefs continue to unspool, and you begin to connect their quiet moral logic to the people you've watched this morning. The vendor who rose before dawn to feed strangers, generosity without ceremony. The caretaker who cleared the seam, prevention without praise. The visitor who offered space at a narrow corner, courtesy without making it weird. Even the cat who wandered off without acknowledging your existence. Self-respect with no need for validation, honestly inspiring. And then your mind, because it loves a callback like it loves caffeine, returns to your tiny lost token. Not as a fear now, but as a marker. It becomes a small symbol of what this morning is doing to you, teaching you that attention solves more problems than anxiety ever will. Teaching you that calm is not a mood, it's a practice. You walk another stretch and find a cluster of reliefs that feels particularly dense. Many figures, layered architecture, a lot happening at once. In the past, you might have tried to understand it quickly, to decode it like a puzzle and move on. Instead, you do something different. You pick one detail and let it be enough. A carved hand holding an offering. The fingers are curved, not rigid. The wrist is angled gently, not stiff. It is a small shape, but it carries an entire attitude. Giving without gripping, offering without controlling what happens next. You let that attitude sit in you for a moment. You don't force it into a life lesson with a motivational caption. You simply feel how it softens your chest. You continue, and another small problem arrives, not external this time, but internal. Your mind begins to drift into the ordinary anxieties waiting for you outside this temple. Your responsibilities, your unfinished tasks, your social obligations, the endless little expectations people place on you and you place on yourself. The corridor becomes a background while your thoughts start rehearsing the rest of your life. You notice it happening, and because you've practiced noticing all morning, you don't scold yourself. You just return. You return to the stone underfoot, to the cool damp air, to the carved scenes beside you. You return the way you return to your missing token, by retracing gently. A thin shaft of sunlight slips into the corridor through an opening, landing on the relief surface and making a small section glow. The illuminated patch reveals dust-like texture, tiny pits in the stone, the physical reality beneath the story. It reminds you that everything here is made of matter. Even meaning is carried by surfaces. Even reverence is carried by feet. You keep walking and your breathing settles again. Inhale. Exhale. One corner. Another. The loop is hypnotic now in the best way, like a lullaby made of geometry. You realize you could keep doing this for hours and never feel like you finished, because the temple is designed to be revisited, to be read again and again at different paces, in different weather, in different moods. And that is, quietly, what it offers you, permission to be unfinished. Permission to circle back. Permission to learn in spirals instead of straight lines. You're not here to conquer Borobudur. You're here to be changed by it, slowly, repetitively, like stone being warmed by sun after rain. The corridor turns again, and you follow, carrying your small recovered token and your larger recovered calm, letting the temple's carved logic echo into the moving, breathing present, into hands that work, feet that walk, and a mind that can finally, for a while, stop shouting. You don't notice the fog thickening at first because you've grown used to its presence, the way you grow used to your own thoughts. Always there, always shifting, sometimes gentle, sometimes surprisingly dramatic. But somewhere between one corner and the next, the air changes again. The corridor light dulls. The openings that usually show you a soft slice of valley now show only pale blankness. Mist has climbed back up the terraces. It slides into the open edges and gathers in the turns, pooling in shaded pockets like a living thing that prefers corners. The reliefs along the wall turn darker, their grooves drinking the last of the scattered light. Your sense of distance shortens. The temple feels closer, more enclosed, as if Borobudur has pulled you back into its own breath. You keep walking, still clockwise, still calm, until you realize the foot traffic around you has thinned. Earlier there were scattered visitors, caretakers moving with quiet purpose, the soft reassurance of other bodies sharing the route. Now, in the mist, silhouettes dissolve. A person you saw 2 turns ago is gone, swallowed by fog and architecture. The soundscape changes too, less fabric, fewer footsteps, more dripping water and the faint hush of moving air. This should be fine. It is fine. And yet your mind, your loyal little chaos generator, tries to turn it into a situation. It begins as a small tightening in your chest. The thought arrives, what if you take the wrong turn? Which is funny, because the temple literally instructs you with walls and corners and a single direction. Still, your brain loves the feeling of potential confusion. It whispers, what if you drift out of the intended path? What if you end up somewhere you're not supposed to be? What if you have to awkwardly backtrack in front of someone and feel like an idiot? Your mind is extremely committed to humiliation as a hobby. You keep your steps steady anyway. You pass another relief panel and notice how the dampness makes the stones slightly slick. Your fingers twitch with the urge to touch the wall for reassurance, but you don't. You let your balance come from your feet, your breath, your attention. You follow the corridor's logic, turn straight. Then you reach a junction-like feeling, not a true junction, but a point where the corridor opens and the edges blur into mist. The usual visual cues are softened. The next turn is there, but fog makes it look like the path continues outward as well, into a pale open space where the temple's lines are less obvious. It's only for a moment, but it's enough for your brain to perk up like a cat hearing a can open. You hesitate. Not long. Not dramatically. Just a fraction of a pause, and in that fraction your mind tries to sprint ahead. You're lost. You're wasting time. You're doing it wrong. You're going to ruin the morning you were trying so hard to be peaceful in. You catch yourself mid-spiral. You remember the token, the rain, the caretaker clearing a seam. You remember that the temple itself is a spiral, and that your brain is trying to out-spiral it in the wrong direction. So you do the simplest thing you can do in fog. You stop moving forward and start paying attention to what is actually true. Your feet are on a corridor floor with carved stone walls on one side and an open edge on the other. The path is designed for clockwise circulation. The corner ahead has a right turn that keeps the center on your right. That is the rule. You don't need a map. You need the rule. You breathe in slowly, then exhale longer than you inhale, letting your nervous system hear the message. We are not in danger, we are just in weather. You take the right turn. The corridor continues, and immediately the lost feeling loosens. The temple's structure returns: walls, boundaries, the steady rhythm of panels. You feel almost amused at how quickly your anxiety evaporates when you refuse to feed it. Your brain, denied its favorite snack, goes quiet again. Still, the fog remains thick, and with it comes a different kind of beauty. The temple becomes softer, more intimate. The reliefs appear and disappear as you pass them, like memories surfacing, then sinking back. Openings show you only white, then suddenly a faint tree line, then white again. The world outside the monument is reduced to suggestion. It's as if Borobudur is asking you to stay inside the present moment because the future and the distance have been erased. You move through a stretch where water drips steadily from an upper seam. The sound is gentle, repetitive, almost musical. Your footsteps join it, creating a small rhythm: drip, step, drip, step. You don't try to make it meaningful, but it becomes soothing anyway. A thin silhouette appears ahead, a caretaker, moving with that familiar quiet purpose. They are partially obscured by fog, but their posture is unmistakable: scanning, clearing, checking. Seeing them steadies you. Not because you needed help, but because they are proof that even in mist, the temple is held by human care. You keep a respectful distance and follow the corridor's loop. In the fog, each corner feels like a small revelation. Turn and find another panel, another carved scene, another reminder that direction can be simple. You realize your fear wasn't really about being lost in the temple. It was about being lost in yourself, about the way your mind sometimes unhooks from reality and runs off into imaginary disaster. Here, in this damp, pale hush, you practice the opposite. You practice returning to the rule, centered to the right, returning to breath, returning to the stone underfoot, returning to the fact that you are walking a designed spiral, not stumbling in wilderness. And by the time you complete another loop segment, the fog begins to feel less like a threat and more like a blanket. A soft veil that makes the temple quieter, makes your senses sharper, makes your attention settle deeper into what's close. You are not lost. You are simply inside the mist, inside the spiral, inside a morning that keeps teaching you the same gentle thing in different forms. Slow down, look carefully, and you will find your way. You keep walking as if the fog is a kind of weather you can wear. It clings to your sleeves, cools your cheeks, softens the edges of everything, and in return it asks you to stay close to what you can actually sense. Stone beneath, breath within. The next corner, not the whole future. The lost moment fades into something almost tender. You're slightly embarrassed by how quickly your brain tried to turn mist into melodrama, and then you're not embarrassed at all, because you realize it's the most human thing in the world. When visibility drops, your imagination tries to fill in the blanks with worst-case scenarios. Borobudur doesn't punish you for that. It simply gives you structure again and again until your nervous system remembers it can trust. A right turn arrives. You take it. The corridor continues. The center stays to your right. The rule holds. And as the rule holds, the world begins to clear, not all at once, but in shy openings. The fog thins in small patches. A slice of trees appears through an outer gap. The pale blankness becomes layered, mist in front, darker green behind, then a faint gray line where hills sit. The temple feels like it's letting you back out into the wider world slowly, the way you let your eyes adjust after waking. You notice a small cluster of people further ahead, 2 visitors and a caretaker. They stand near a corner where water has been dripping steadily. There is no fuss, no pointing, no loud instruction. The caretaker simply clears a small buildup of damp leaves from a seam so the water can drain cleanly. The visitors watch, then step around the spot with careful feet, giving space without being told. You watch too, and it lands again. This place works because people cooperate with it. The spiral is not only stone, it's behavior. Your own cooperation deepens. You don't just try to be respectful anymore. You move respectfully the way you move when carrying something fragile. You keep your body close to your own lane. You don't cut corners. You don't reach for the reliefs. You let the temple lead and you follow like a guest in someone else's home. It's a small shift, but it changes everything. Your body relaxes. Your walking becomes smoother, less cautious in a nervous way and more cautious in a skilled way. The difference is subtle. One kind of caution comes from fear, the other from care. You feel yourself crossing into the second. The fog keeps loosening. Light brightens. Moisture on the stone begins to evaporate in slow invisibility. You can smell it, warm dampness lifting, that mineral scent turning lighter. The relief panels regain contrast as shadows return. What was flattened by mist begins to deepen again. The temple reappears in details, crisp borders, carved faces, the slight ridge of a hand holding an offering. You find yourself thinking about your token again, not to worry about it, but as a quiet reminder, you recovered it by slowing down. You navigated the fog by following one simple rule. You handled rain by shortening your steps and keeping your balance low. The temple keeps giving you the same advice in different costumes. And you keep learning it, which is honestly suspicious. People rarely learn things this smoothly. But here you are. As you continue the loop, you begin to sense a gentle resolve forming. Not the loud, new me, kind, not the kind that burns bright and collapses by Tuesday. A quieter resolve. The kind that feels like, maybe I can take this pace back with me. Maybe I can treat my own mind like a monument worth caring for, clearing seams, preventing buildup, wiping away slick patches before they become falls. You complete another corner, and the corridor opens toward a descending route. The temple's geometry suggests a transition. The upper calm you tasted, the wide openness among bell stupas, is behind you now. Below, the world of stalls, trees, and daytime rhythm waits. You feel a little reluctance. Not because you're desperate to stay in history forever, but because you've grown attached to this very specific calm, the kind that doesn't demand you be anyone other than a breathing body moving through stone and weather. You begin to descend, and the air warms subtly with each step. The fog is now only a thin veil in the distance. The valley returns in soft layers. Far off, volcano shapes reassert themselves faintly, like someone sketching them in charcoal rather than ink. Your knees, who have been quietly complaining since Section 2, feel the descent and send a small memo of protest. You listen without dramatizing it. You adjust your pace. You use the edges of your feet. You let your weight settle before shifting. You make peace with the fact that spiritual journeys are often, inconveniently, physical journeys. At a landing, you pause and look back up the terraces you've walked. The path you traveled is now visible in a new way, not as a maze or a challenge, but as a pattern of patience. The monument doesn't feel like something you did. It feels like something you participated in. Like you lent it your footsteps for a morning, and in return it lent you its steady mind. As you continue downward, you pass a section of stone where water still clings in dark patches. It catches light. It glows briefly. It will dry. Everything here is in motion, even when it looks still. You reach the lower levels where the reliefs are dense again, and you move through them with a softer kind of attention. You're not hunting meaning. You're letting meaning settle naturally, the way sediment settles when you stop shaking the jar. And then, without any grand finale, you realize your small problems are resolved. The token is safe. The rain has passed. The fog has lifted. The spiral holds. You are back on the path, not just physically, but inwardly, calmer, steadier, and slightly wiser in a way that doesn't need to be announced. You keep descending and circling, and the temple's rhythm becomes a kind of farewell that doesn't need words. The stone underfoot is warmer now, no longer that first dawn chill. The air has shifted from mist cool to morning soft, with just enough humidity to keep everything smelling alive. Somewhere below, you can sense the world returning to its daytime habits. More footsteps, more movement, the faint distant rustle of people assembling plans. But up here, in the higher turns of the walk, the monument still holds a quieter register. The bell stupas you wandered among remain above and behind you, and even as you move away from them, their logic lingers. Lattice shadow, open sky, space that teaches your body to unclench. You take one last slow circuit that feels like finishing a long exhale. The relief-lined corridors below begin to feel different now that you've tasted the circles above. Earlier, the carvings were a river you followed panel by panel. Now they feel like a memory you can carry without needing to hold every detail. You understand in your bones that the point was never to memorize. The point was to move through them with attention, like walking through your own life with a little more care. At a turn, you pause beside a relief that's been softened by time, its figures less crisp than the others. It might have frustrated you earlier, less detail, less content. Now, it feels tender. Weather has rubbed it down the way affection rubs down the sharp edges of someone you love. The scene is still there, still legible in posture and composition, but it's gentler. It reminds you that endurance doesn't always look like staying perfect. Sometimes endurance looks like staying present even as you change. You continue, and the path offers small glimpses outward through openings, fields brightening, trees lifting their leaves, fog retreating into distant folds. The volcanoes are faint now, half hidden behind daylight haze, like they've stepped back from the stage. Merapi's silhouette, so stark at sunrise, now blends into the atmosphere. It's still there, of course. It just doesn't need to perform. You suspect this is another lesson. You find yourself watching your own feet as you walk. Not with anxiety, but with appreciation. These same feet carried you up through damp corridors, across slick terraces, through rain and fog and a brief moment of losing something you didn't realize mattered. They adjusted. They learned. They kept you upright. It's a strangely moving thought, because you often treat your body like a vehicle you criticize rather than a partner you respect. Your token rests safe in your pocket, and you no longer touch it to check. You've stopped needing proof that things are okay. You can feel okay without evidence. That's new, and it's almost suspicious. As you near the point where the upper levels give way to the final descent, you sense the farewell arriving, not as sadness, but as a gentle loosening. The temple has done what it does. It held you long enough for your nervous system to settle, then it begins to release you back to your ordinary life. You realize that the most touching goodbyes are often like this, quiet, gradual, without speeches. A caretaker passes again, carrying a folded cloth. Their presence feels like the final stitch in the morning. You watch them move with the same unshowy care you've been borrowing, and you feel a kind of gratitude that doesn't demand anything back. Not gratitude for a service, but gratitude for stewardship. For the fact that someone tends seams and drains and slick patches so a monument can keep offering its slow teachings to strangers like you. You descend another set of steps. Below, the sound of the world becomes clearer, a distant murmur, a clink, a soft call, still not loud, but more human, more daytime. You can smell the faint hint of breakfast smoke again, maybe from nearby stalls restarting their fires, or maybe the scent simply drifted up and stayed in your memory. You let it wrap around you like a warm scarf. You reach a lower landing and look back one last time, letting your eyes travel upward along the terraces. The monument rises in patient layers, the squares stacking into circles, the circles crowned with stupas. In full daylight, it looks both more solid and more mysterious. The carvings are less dramatic than they were in dawn's shadow, but they're still there, holding their quiet river of scenes. The upper stupas no longer glow gold. They sit in pale sun, calm and indifferent to your sentimentality. You feel the urge to make this moment into something grand, to promise yourself you will change, to swear you will be calmer forever, to declare that this morning fixed you. And then you laugh softly inside yourself, because you know that's not how humans work. You will go back to your life and your mind will still sometimes sprint. You will still lose tiny things. You will still overthink. That's the deal. But you can take something smaller, and therefore more real. The memory of walking in circles until your thoughts stopped biting. The memory of rain teaching you to step carefully. The memory of fog teaching you to trust structure. The memory of caretakers showing you that calm is maintenance, not magic. You turn your body toward the exit path, toward the world that waits with its practical demands. And as you begin that final descent, you carry the temple's quiet inside you, not like a souvenir, but like a rhythm. A slow, steady loop you can return to whenever you start spiraling too fast. You keep descending, step by careful step, and the temple's hush thins the way mist thins, slowly, without a clean break. The corridors open into broader walkways, and the air feels warmer, more ordinary, more like the day is putting its shoes on. Your legs carry the gentle ache of a long loop completed, but it isn't the sharp ache of suffering. It's the honest ache of movement, the kind that says you were here in your body, not just in your head. At the lower terraces, the reliefs sit closer to eye level again, and you pass them as if passing familiar faces on a street you've walked all your life. You don't stop to decode. You let the scenes blur slightly at the edges, because you've learned something more useful than information: pace. The carvings taught you to slow, the circles taught you to breathe, the rain taught you to place your foot before you shift your weight, and the fog taught you to trust a simple rule instead of your loud imagination. Outside the openings, the landscape is fully awake now. The valley is brighter, the greens more definite, the last scraps of fog tucked into distant folds. The volcanoes have retreated into daylight haze, still present but no longer performing for you. You like that about them. They're simply existing. You reach a turn where the stone changes texture underfoot, slightly rougher, less worn, and you feel the boundary between the temple's inner logic and the world's outer rhythm. Somewhere below, you hear more movement, soft, practical sounds, the shuffle of people arriving, a faint clink of something metal, the rustle of rain covers being folded away. It isn't noisy. It's just life returning to its normal volume. Your hand drifts toward your pocket and meets the token again, secure where you placed it deeper this time. You don't pull it out. You don't need to. The reassurance is in the fact that you remember how you found it, by tracing water, by looking for the seam, by refusing to sprint into panic. You let that memory settle as a quiet callback you can use later, the next time your mind tries to convince you that a small problem is the apocalypse. A caretaker passes in the opposite direction, stepping lightly, carrying a cloth folded into a neat rectangle. Their face is calm in that practiced way, present, focused, unromantic. You feel a final surge of gratitude that doesn't need an audience. This place stands because someone clears leaves from seams and wipes slick patches before they become falls. Ancient stone survives because of ordinary mornings. You descend another flight and the temple begins to feel less like a labyrinth and more like a hillside again, a constructed mountain that you are now walking down. The sky above is pale and steady. Sunlight touches the edges of the stair blocks, making thin lines of brightness that guide your feet. You take them slowly anyway, because you've become the kind of person who respects slippery stone, and that's not the worst personality upgrade. At the base, the air changes. It smells more like soil and leaves, more like smoke and breakfast, more like human schedules. You step off the last stones and onto the path that leads away from the terraces, and the world widens in a different way. Not the open sky circle way, but there are errands and bodies and plans way. You can feel the day reaching for you with its many hands. Before you fully let it take you, you pause and look back once more. Borobudur rises behind you in stacked patience, squares transitioning into circles, circles crowned with bell stupas that hold their quiet figures inside. In daylight, the monument looks less like a mystery and more like a certainty. Yes, this exists. Humans made this. Time tried to eat it. Someone kept saying no. Your mind tries to rush toward meaning again, toward neat conclusions, toward tidy morals, toward the kind of lesson you can package and carry like a souvenir keychain. You let it try, and then you let it fail. The real lesson is messier and kinder. You can return to calm by returning to something simple. Breath. Footfall. A rule. A loop. A careful hand. You start walking toward the gate and the small world of stalls. Steam rises again from pots, brighter now, and you catch the scent of ginger and rice and damp leaf wrap. The vendor hands that tied parcels earlier are still tying parcels. A cat slips through the shade with the same bored confidence as before. The broom whispers over stone again, maintenance continuing, calm continuing, devotion disguised as work. You take a few more steps and the temple is partly hidden by trees, then mostly hidden, then present only as a weight behind you. You feel that familiar modern pull, phone, schedule, the next task, reaching for you. And you do something small but decisive. You let your shoulders stay low. You let your breath stay slow. You let the morning's pace remain in you like warm tea. You leave without a dramatic goodbye, because the place doesn't need one. It will be here, spiraling quietly, whenever you return, whether you return in person or only in memory on a night when your thoughts won't stop circling. You carry the lattice shadow calm, the rain-slick caution, and the fog-soft trust with you into the brightening townlight, and you keep walking like someone who has learned, at least for today, how to move gently through the world. And now you let everything slow, even more than it already has. You let the last warmth of morning sit on your skin like a gentle hand, and you let your thoughts loosen their grip, one finger at a time. In your mind, the terraces fade behind the trees, not vanishing, just settling into the background the way a steady heartbeat settles when you stop checking for it. You picture the bell stupas again, quiet and round, holding cool shadow inside their latticed openings. You remember the sunrise turning mist to gold, and then the rain turning gold back into gray, and how you stayed upright by staying patient. You remember the tiny panic of the missing token and the calm way you found it, as if the temple lent you its own unhurried mind for a few minutes. You remember the broom whispering across wet stone, the hands folding leaf-wrapped parcels, and the ginger warmth in your chest and belly. Let the memory settle, without asking it to perform. Let all of it become softer now, as if the images are being lowered onto a pillow. The edges blur. The bright spots dim. The sounds grow distant, drip, step, the hush of fog, the quiet breath of a hillside monument keeping its shape through time. Your breathing stays slow. Inhale, and feel your chest rise without effort. Exhale, and feel your shoulders sink. There is nothing you need to solve tonight. Whatever waits for you tomorrow can wait a little longer. If any worry tries to return, let it pass like mist through an opening, drifting in, drifting out, never needing a fight. Keep the calm. Keep the warmth. Keep the gentle loop of the spiral inside you, and let it carry you downward into sleep, very, very gently. End of story. Sweet dreams.